They were America's favorite duo, the kings of comedy, and the undisputed masters of the buddy picture. For a whole generation of moviegoers, Bing Crosby and Bob Hope were a single, joyous thought that promised laughter, adventure, and an easy, unbreakable friendship. Their on-screen camaraderie was the stuff of Hollywood legend, a perfect cocktail of smooth charm and rapid-fire wit that captivated millions. They traveled the world in their famous Road to Bay pictures, always with a song on their lips and a joke at the ready. To the entire world, they were the best of friends. But was it real? Behind the curtain of Hollywood glamour, the story was far more complicated. While the public saw two inseparable pals, the private relationship was one of business, rivalry, and a remarkable professional distance. The on-screen magic was undeniable, but the off-screen friendship the world believed in was largely an illusion, carefully constructed and brilliantly marketed for decades. This isn't a story of outright hatred, but something almost more fascinating. The untold story of the complicated, distant, and deeply misunderstood partnership between two of Hollywood's biggest icons. Before they were a legendary pair, they were two very different men on two very different paths. To understand the complicated dynamic that would come to define them, you have to understand the chasm that existed between them from the start. First, there was Bing Crosby. By the late 1930s, Crosby wasn't just a star, he was a force of nature. He was arguably the first true multimedia superstar. His warm, intimate baritone flowed from nearly every radio in America, changing the very art of popular singing. His records sold by the millions. His films were box office gold, and he'd already won an Academy Award for Best Actor. Crosby was, in short, the king. He was cool, he was a bit aloof, and he carried an air of effortless superiority because, frankly, he'd earned it. He didn't need a partner. His name alone sold tickets. Then there was Bob Hope. Born Leslie Towns Hope in England, he was a different breed entirely. Hope was a product of the vaudeville grind, a sharp, hungry comedian with a machine gun delivery and an incredible work ethic. Where Crosby's charm was relaxed, Hope's was frantic and needy. He was a joke factory, a master of the one-liner who had achieved massive success on the radio. But his film career was still finding its footing. He was a star, sure, but he wasn't Bing Crosby. In the rigid hierarchy of old Hollywood, he was seen as a comedian, a gag man, which put him on a different level. He looked at Crosby not quite as a peer, but as the peak of a mountain he was still climbing. The idea to pair them wasn't some stroke of genius during a friendly round of golf. It was a calculated business decision by Paramount Pictures. A script for Road to Singapore was floating around, and after other potential pairings fell through, the studio decided to gamble on two of their contract players, Crosby and Hope. They weren't close friends. They'd met on the vaudeville circuit years earlier but hadn't really connected since. From the moment filming began, though, something clicked. It wasn't just the script, it was the improvisation. Crosby and Hope started ad-libbing, breaking the fourth wall and playfully insulting each other. The result was cinematic magic. The film was a smash hit, and the Crosby-Hope brand was born. Audiences fell in love with the dynamic. Crosby, the smooth operator, and Hope, the fast-talking fall guy. Their banter felt so natural, so genuine, that the public just assumed it had to be real. The only problem was, for Bing and Bob, that's not quite what it was. In the early days, the power dynamic was clear. Bing Crosby was the main attraction, and Bob Hope was the co-star. This wasn't just an unspoken understanding, it was written into their contracts. For the first few Road to films, Crosby, the established movie star, earned significantly more than Hope. To Crosby, this just made sense. It reflected their standings in the industry. He was the one with the Oscar and the proven box office draw, but Bob Hope was fiercely ambitious and knew his own worth. He understood that the success of the movies wasn't just about Bing singing, it was about their unique chemistry. He was pulling his weight, and he wanted to be compensated for it. The financial gap gnawed at him, a constant reminder that he was seen as the junior partner. The breaking point came around 1947. Hope, now a major movie star in his own right, went back to the negotiating table. He demanded financial parity, the exact same salary as Crosby for their pictures. It was a bold move that directly challenged the established order. And it worked. The studio, not wanting to break up its golden goose, agreed. For Bob Hope, this was a matter of professional respect. For Bing Crosby, it signaled a fundamental shift in their relationship. Crosby, by many accounts, had a quiet but immense ego and never truly saw Hope as his artistic equal. He viewed himself as a natural talent, while he saw Hope's comedy as something constructed by a team of writers. For Hope to demand the same paycheck challenged that perception. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the status the money represented. This dispute solidified their dynamic. They were now official equals on paper, but privately, a chill had set in. The public saw two pals, but behind the scenes they were now rivals. The professional rivalry was cemented by a fundamental gap. In their personalities, on screen, they were a perfect match. Off-screen, they were oil and water. Perhaps the greatest acting job they ever did was convincing the world they were close friends, because in their private lives, they barely spent any time together. Bing Crosby, despite being one of the most famous men in the world, was a deeply private person. He was famously aloof and seemed to tolerate his own stardom more than he enjoyed it. He eventually moved his family to Northern California, far from the Hollywood social scene. On set, crew members noted that between takes, while Hope was charming, everyone and telling jokes, Crosby would often retreat to a corner to read a newspaper. He was a bit of a loner. Bob Hope was the polar opposite. He was addicted to the limelight and fed off the energy of an audience. He was always on, always performing. He thrived in the very Hollywood environment that Crosby tried to escape. This wasn't just a preference. It was a core difference in how they lived. Crosby wanted to get the work done and go home. For Hope, the work was his home. This personal divide had real-world consequences. For all the years they worked together, their families never socialized. In an interview late in his life, Bob Hope admitted with a hint of hurt that in all the decades he knew Bing, he and his wife Dolores were never once invited to the Crosby home for dinner. It was a small detail that spoke volumes. It wasn't an oversight. It was a clear boundary drawn by Crosby, signaling that their association ended when the cameras stopped rolling. The friction between Crosby and Hope often spilled onto the film sets. The spontaneous chemistry audiences loved was sometimes the result of tense negotiations just before the cameras rolled. Their conflicting personalities translated directly into conflicting work styles. Crosby approached his work with a cool, detached confidence. He was a natural, and he knew it. He trusted his instincts and had little patience for what he saw as unnecessary fussing. Hope, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of energy, constantly trying to top the last joke and squeeze in one more gag. While their ad-libbing became a trademark, behind the scenes it could be a source of conflict. Arguments would erupt over lines, sometimes escalating to the point where an exasperated Hope would walk off the set, frustrated by Crosby's refusal to go along with a bit. When the director yelled, "Cut!" the two would often retreat to opposite ends of the set, maintaining an icy distance until it was time for the next take. The core of the issue was Crosby's perception of their respective talents. While the claim that he called Hope a talentless hack is unsubstantiated, it's clear Crosby saw a difference between them. He viewed his own ability as an innate, natural gift. In his mind, Hope's comedy was more manufactured, heavily dependent on his large team of writers who supplied him with jokes. He saw Hope as a master craftsman of comedy, but not necessarily a true artist in the way he saw himself. This created an impossible dynamic. Hope, on some level, admired Crosby's natural charisma and sought his approval. But he was also frustrated by being treated as the inferior talent. From Crosby's perspective, he was simply maintaining a professional hierarchy he believed was accurate. So while they stood side by side charming audiences, they were locked in a silent struggle. The smiles were for the camera, but the private tension was very real. Knowing the real distance between them makes their public banter all the more brilliant. The constant stream of insults they traded at awards, shows, and on the radio wasn't just friendly ribbing. It was a masterclass in turning real-life friction into entertainment. They figured out they could voice their genuine frustrations as jokes, and the audience, thinking it was all an act, would eat it up. Their public insults became their trademark. Hope would crack jokes about Crosby's age or his wealth. Crosby would relentlessly mock Hope's famous ski slope nose and his golf game. In Road to Bali, Hope turns to the camera as Crosby is about to sing and says, "He's going to sing. Folks, now's the time to go out and get the popcorn." It's a funny line, but it also lands with a genuine edge, reflecting the real tension over ad-libbing on set. They made cracks about money, a sore subject after their contract dispute, and even had competing Christmas songs with White Christmas and Silver Bells. But the most famous line, one Hope used often, summed it all up perfectly. He'd say with a wry smile, "There's nothing I wouldn't do for Bing, and there's nothing he wouldn't do for me." And that's how we go through life, doing nothing for each other. The genius of the line is that it was both a charming joke and the literal truth. They were inextricably linked in the public eye while doing almost nothing for each other personally. This public performance of a friendly feud was essential. Breaking the illusion would be bad for business. So, they kept the act going for decades, bound together by a shared history and a shared bank account. As Hollywood's golden age faded, the careers of Crosby and Hope went in different directions, but the strange, distant nature of their relationship remained. Their final film, 1962's The Road to Hong Kong, felt different. The easy charm seemed more forced, and telling of the chill, their longtime co-star Dorothy Lamour was demoted to a brief cameo, a move Crosby reportedly supported, much to Hope's frustration. In the years that followed, Crosby embraced the role of respected patriarch. He focused on business investments and a life of semi-retirement with his second family. Hope, meanwhile, never slowed down. He relentlessly pursued the spotlight, becoming a TV icon and tirelessly entertaining American troops around the world. The distance between them grew. The old hurts never truly faded. Hope admitted in private that his feelings for Bing were complicated and that he had been deeply hurt by the decades of being kept at arm's length. After Crosby's death, Hope's daughter recalled that her father would often avoid talking about Bing, not wanting to relive something that was never truly resolved. Sometimes, when their old movies came on TV, Hope would just quietly change the channel. On October 14, 1977, after a round of golf in Spain, Bing Crosby collapsed and died from a massive heart attack. When the news reached Bob Hope, he was reportedly shattered. He canceled his own performance and flew back to California, telling a reporter in a moment of unguarded grief, "A part of my life went with Bing." It was a complex reaction. Was it grief for a lost friend, or for the profound loss of a lifelong rival who had defined his entire career? Maybe it was both. For 45 years, they were Crosby and Hope. In their mutual resentment and respect, they were a unit. With Crosby's death, that unit was broken forever. The story of Crosby and Hope is a powerful look behind the curtain of Hollywood's golden age, reminding us that the images on screen are often just that, images. If you found this look into one of Hollywood's most complicated partnerships fascinating, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories, and let us know in the comments, does knowing the truth about their relationship change how you see the road to movies? The real story of Bing Crosby and Bob Hope wasn't about hatred. It was a partnership born of commerce, not camaraderie, and defined by a complex mix of professional jealousy and wildly incompatible personalities. To the world, they were best friends, but in reality, they were colleagues locked in a decades-long power struggle. Crosby, the aloof king, never quite saw Hope as his equal, while Hope, the ambitious striver, both admired and resented the man he could never fully win over. They maintained the facade because it was good for business, their public banter a clever performance that masked a genuine personal distance. Their wives never socialized, and their relationship off-camera was defined by a cold, unbridgeable gap. Their story is one of Hollywood's great complicated truths. The magical chemistry audiences loved was an illusion, a brilliant piece of acting by two men who were, at their core, rivals. Perhaps the very tension that drove them apart in private is what made their on-screen dynamic so electric. They were the perfect partners in fame and fortune, but they were never partners in friendship, and their legacy is a powerful reminder that in Hollywood, the most convincing performances often continue long after the cameras stop rolling.